Elvis Presley once wrote a private letter to Barbra Streisand, one he never expected her to read, let alone answer. For decades, fans only whispered about its contents. But when her response finally surfaced, long after his death, it shattered assumptions about their relationship and revealed a truth almost no one was ready for. Las Vegas Hilton, April 4, 1972. The stage lights washed the whole arena in gold, and nearly 18,000 people leaned forward as Elvis walked out in a white jumpsuit and a blue silk scarf that wouldn't stop drifting over his shoulder. The air felt hot and electric, almost like the crowd itself was breathing. When the band hit the first notes of CC Rider, the floor shook under the weight of so many voices shouting his name. But if you looked closely, something was different. Elvis kept glancing toward the left wing, like he was waiting for someone. A small crackle slipped through the mic, and he paused for half a heartbeat, just long enough for a few fans in the front row to wonder what was pulling his attention away. People later said his voice trembled on one of the high notes, something he almost never let happen. Behind the curtain, a stagehand named Marty Kellerman watched him with a nervous frown. Marty had been there earlier that afternoon when an envelope changed hands. It was simple, cream-colored, and addressed to one person, Barbra Streisand. Elvis had slipped it to Marty quietly, asking only that it be delivered with care. No cameras, no crowd, no fuss, just a letter from one legend to another. Why would Elvis write to her? Why now, during the busiest leg of his Vegas run? And what could he possibly have said that weighed on him even as he sang to a roaring audience? The scarf fluttered again as he wiped sweat from his neck. From where the front rows sat, he looked powerful, larger than life. But backstage, that quiet envelope carried a truth he wasn't ready to speak out loud. A truth that made him look, for a fragile moment, almost human. The crowd didn't know any of this. They only felt the tiny shift in his energy, like a single soft note played in the middle of a storm. A few fans whispered to each other, wondering if something was wrong. Others pulled out small tape recorders, hoping to capture the show. One of those recordings, worn and a little fuzzy, would later reveal a strange pause in the middle of the second song. A pause collectors still talk about today. Have you ever stood in front of a room full of people, pretending everything was fine, while one thought kept tugging at your mind? And if you were Elvis, with the world watching your every move, how heavy would a private message feel? As the final chorus faded, Elvis turned again toward the wings. The band pushed into the next number, but his eyes said he wasn't thinking about the music anymore. Something else had taken root in him, a hope, a fear, or maybe both. The whole arena seemed to sense a shift, like the story happening behind the curtain was bigger than the one on stage. And somewhere backstage, that sealed envelope waited in a jacket pocket, ready to disappear. The letter wasn't meant to be a secret, but it wasn't meant for the world either. Elvis had written it late the night before, sitting alone in his suite on the 30th floor of the Hilton. The city glowed beneath him, neon buzzing, car horns echoing, tourists cheering as if all of Vegas lived on one endless breath. But inside that quiet room, he felt something else, a strange mix of bravery and loneliness. He pulled out a piece of cream stationery, the kind he used for personal notes, and wrote Barbra Streisand's name at the top. His handwriting wasn't perfect. Some letters leaned forward, like they were trying to escape the page. Others sat heavy, pressed hard enough to leave impressions on the sheet below. It looked like a man wrestling with words he didn't usually speak. He didn't write about music first, or fame, or opportunity. He wrote about pressure, about how he admired the way Barbra stood on stage, completely herself, bold, stubborn, soft, impossible to shake. He wrote that she didn't hide behind applause. She didn't pretend. She fought for every inch of her truth. "You understand the weight of eyes on you," he wrote. "You understand what it costs." He asked if she would ever consider a collaboration, something raw, honest, maybe for film, maybe for a song. But there was more between the lines, something tender, something almost fragile. Fans would later describe the tone as a man reaching across a long hallway, hoping someone would turn and look back. Marty Kellerman saw the letter when Elvis folded it carefully and sealed it. "Handle it with care," he told him. Elvis didn't smile. He didn't joke. He just waited until Marty nodded. That silence said enough. "Why Barbra? Why now? Have you ever found someone who felt like a mirror? Not because they looked like you, but because they lived at your altitude?" The next morning, Elvis seemed lighter, but only for a moment. During rehearsal, he drifted off mid-verse. The backup singers exchanged confused glances. Even the brass section softened, waiting for him to snap back. And when Marty slipped the envelope into the mailbag that afternoon, Elvis watched from across the room like he was letting go of something he couldn't pull back. That night, as the crowd flooded into the Hilton showroom, women clutching ticket stubs, men adjusting their collars, the air swelling with perfume and excitement, Elvis tried to focus on the music. But every time a stagehand walked past him, he looked for the letter. He looked for news. The arena throbbed with cheers, but inside his chest there was a quiet thump of hope. A hope that maybe, just maybe, Barbra would read his words and understand what he couldn't say out loud. People think legends never fear being ignored, but silence can cut deeper than any criticism. Fans close to the stage swore Elvis blinked away emotion during "You've Lost That Lovin' Feelin'." Maybe the lights hit him wrong. Maybe the crowd noise overwhelmed him. Or maybe it was the thought of that envelope, traveling through hands he couldn't see, toward a woman he respected more than he'd ever said in interviews. But the moment the letter left his hands, something unexpected began. Something no one was ready for. 2 weeks later, something happened inside the Las Vegas Hilton that even longtime staff still whisper about. The letter, Elvis's carefully written note to Barbra Streisand, vanished. Not delayed, not misplaced, gone. Marty Kellerman realized it first. He was sorting outgoing mail in a cramped back room behind the stage, the walls lined with old posters and tape reels. The cream-colored envelope should have been at the top of the stack. He remembered placing it there himself. But when he reached for it, only empty space stared back at him. The room felt suddenly colder. He checked under the table, inside drawers, beneath the stack of fan letters. Nothing. His heartbeat kicked up, and his throat tightened. Losing a normal letter was fine. Losing a letter from Elvis Presley, meant for Barbra Streisand, was something else entirely. Marty ran to find Al D'Angelo, the Hilton's strict but fair security chief. Al had handled everything from overexcited fans to backstage intruders. But when Marty told him what happened, even Al's face shifted. His jaw tightened. His eyes narrowed. "Tell no one," Al said. "Not yet." Rumors inside the Hilton traveled faster than the elevator. If anyone learned that Elvis had written something private, something that mattered to him, it would explode. Tabloids camped outside the hotel like hungry shadows. A single whisper could turn into a headline by morning. Al started a quiet search. He pulled aside ushers, backstage runners, kitchen staff who passed through the mail area. He even checked camera logs, though in 1972 coverage was spotty. One detail kept appearing. A young fan had been escorted out 2 nights earlier after sneaking into a restricted hallway. She carried a purse large enough to hide a letter. The possibility hit Elvis harder than he let on. That night, April 19th, he stepped onto the Hilton stage again, but his rhythm felt off. During The Impossible Dream, he mixed up 2 lines, something so rare that fans in the front row exchanged surprised looks. The band kept playing, but Elvis's eyes drifted toward the wings again and again, as if someone might walk out holding the missing envelope. The crowd felt the tension even if they didn't understand it. The cheers softened. Photographers lowered their cameras for a moment. A strange hush washed through the room, the kind of hush that only happens when thousands of people sense something they can't name. Have you ever lost something that took a piece of your confidence with it? Something small to the world, but huge to your heart? Backstage after the show, Elvis paced. He tugged at the edge of his scarf, eyes distant. When Al approached with an update, still no letter, Elvis didn't raise his voice. He didn't blame anyone. He just sat down, elbows on his knees, breathing slow and heavy. "It meant something," he finally said. "I needed her to hear me." Those words hung in the air like dust in a beam of stage light. Pattern breaker moment hit then. Elvis stood up fast. Too fast. "We find it," he said quietly. "Or we hope she gets it anyway." But hope felt thin that night. For 3 days, hotel staff combed through every corner. Trash bins, laundry carts, storage closets. Nothing. The envelope had slipped through their fingers like a ghost. And the longer it stayed missing, the more Elvis believed Barbra would never see what he wrote. Then, months later, a message arrived. A message that changed everything. August 1972. The Vegas heat pressed against the hotel windows like a living thing. Elvis had just finished a long rehearsal inside the Hilton showroom when Marty Kellerman hurried toward him with a small slip of paper. Marty looked pale, like he'd seen something unbelievable. Elvis stopped mid-step. "It's from Irwin Fine," Marty said. "Barbra's manager." For a moment, Elvis didn't breathe. Marty handed him the message. Just a few lines scribbled quickly. Barbra received the letter. It arrived late, damaged, but readable. She's grateful. She wants him to know that. She's choosing to respond privately. The paper trembled slightly between Elvis's fingers. The silence around him grew thick. Then something softened in his face. Not relief exactly, but the feeling of a weight easing by half. Barbra had seen it. She had read every word. And she cared enough to send a message back. But there was another sentence. One that changed the tone instantly. She isn't ready to respond publicly. Not because she didn't respect him. Not because she didn't want to. But because she feared what the world would do with their connection. In 1972, tabloids twisted even the smallest truth into something loud and cruel. Barbra knew that better than anyone. One wrong headline could turn a quiet message between artists into a scandal neither deserved. Elvis stared at the note for a long time. The mic from rehearsal still hummed faintly across the stage. A few crew members watched from a distance, pretending not to stare. When he finally spoke, his voice had a cracked warmth to it. "She gets it," he said. "She really gets it." Charlie Hodge, standing near the monitor board, nodded slowly. "She always did, man." But the truth hit deeper than Elvis expected. Barbra's gratitude warmed him. Her caution stung him. It was a strange mix, like being hugged and pushed away at the same time. Have you ever felt that? When someone reaches for you with one hand but shields themselves with the other. Later that evening, Elvis walked through the quiet hallway behind the showroom. The carpet absorbed his footsteps. The framed photos on the walls watched silently. He held the slip of paper in his palm the way someone holds a fragile keepsake. He understood Barbra's fear. Fame had claws, tore things apart. He had seen it ruin friendships, relationships, promises. He didn't want that for her. But another question lingered in him. If she cared, even a little, why did her message feel so far away? As the night deepened, the showroom lights dimmed to nothing. A soft hum echoed through the empty seats. Elvis stood alone on the stage where earlier thousands had cheered, but now the silence felt louder than any applause. He folded the note carefully, the way he had folded his letter to her. A small, private symmetry between two people standing oceans apart under the same spotlight. Down the hallway, a door clicked. A gust of cool air pushed in from outside. Something in the wind felt like change. Sharp, sudden, impossible to ignore, because fate was about to shift the story again. By 1974, the distance between Elvis and Barbra wasn't made of silence anymore. It was made of timing, bad timing. Both of them were climbing their own mountains, but those mountains were facing different directions. Barbra was shaping a dream she had carried since her early 20s. A film that felt honest, raw, and painfully human. A film called A Star is Born. And Elvis, he was searching for something too. A way back, a way forward, a way out. When Barbra approached him about the project, it felt like the universe handing them a second chance. Maybe more than a second chance. Maybe the chance. She wasn't offering a typical Hollywood role. She wanted him as the lead. Him. Elvis Presley. Not the icon. Not the jumpsuit. The man. For a moment, it seemed like everything was aligning. Marty Kellerman later said Elvis looked lit up from the inside when he read the proposal. He whispered, "This could be the one." A film with depth. A story with heart. A way to show the world something beyond the spotlight. Something he had been trying to say for years. But the world doesn't always open doors. Sometimes it closes them quietly. Colonel Tom Parker, Elvis's manager, hated the idea. Not because it was risky, not because of the work, but because the contract didn't give him full control. He wanted Elvis to perform songs chosen by him. He wanted script rewrites. He wanted money. More money. Always more. Barbra refused. She wasn't trying to control Elvis. She was trying to protect the story. Protect the truth. Protect him. She wanted him free on camera, not fenced in by another person's fear. Meetings ended cold. Phone calls sharpened. Letters turned formal. The project slipped through their hands like dry sand. Elvis felt it. Barbra felt it. The world didn't know it yet, but they had come within inches of creating something unforgettable. And the letter, the one she had read months late, sat quietly in a manila folder inside her archive now. A reminder of a conversation that never happened. A reminder of a partnership that almost was. Have you ever watched something beautiful drift away because the people around you couldn't see what you saw? Have you ever felt a door close even as your hand reached for the doorknob? Elvis tried to pretend the disappointment didn't follow him. But backstage during his March 17th show at the Mid-South Coliseum, crowd size just over 12,000, he looked out at the cheering fans with a distant sadness. His voice was still powerful, but his eyes said something else. What if this is my last chance to do something different? Barbra, meanwhile, pushed forward. She built the film from the ground up. Every scene, every line, every ounce of emotion. And yet, in private moments, she wondered about him. Would the film have changed him? Would he have changed the film? Could they have helped each other escape the traps that fame had built around them? Sometimes the right people arrive at the wrong moment. Sometimes the right moment arrives without the right people. And then came the night when everything stopped. August 16, 1977. Barbra was reviewing footage when a trembling assistant stepped inside the studio. His voice cracked when he spoke. She felt the world tilt under her feet. The editing room went silent. Even the machines seemed to hold their breath. Elvis Presley was gone. Gone before she ever had the chance to say everything she meant. Gone before she could give him the reply she had written in private. Gone before their paths could cross again. And in that moment, the project didn't matter. Only the letter did. August 16, 1977. The world stopped breathing for a moment. Barbra Streisand was inside a dim studio room in Los Angeles, reviewing a scene she had watched 100 times already. The projector hummed softly, scattering warm light across the walls. Editors whispered to each other, scissors clicked, and film reels spun like tiny hypnotic wheels. Then the door opened. Her assistant, Mark, stood there, pale, shaking, holding a newspaper bulletin that shouldn't have existed yet. His voice cracked as he tried to speak. "Elvis," he said. "He's gone." The projector kept running, but the room behind Barbra collapsed into silence. She didn't stand. She didn't speak. She didn't even blink. She stared at Mark as if waiting for him to take the words back. But he didn't. He couldn't. The film reel snapped loudly as it reached its end. A harsh pop cutting through the quiet. That sound pulled her back into the moment. She pressed a hand to her chest, feeling something deep and sudden. An ache she hadn't expected. She whispered, "I should have said more." No cameras were there. No reporters. Just a woman who had carried a reply for years. A reply she never sent. What fans never knew was that Barbra had written her own letter to Elvis long before his death. She had written it in 1973, late at night, after reading his original note. It wasn't formal. It wasn't polished. It was human. She thanked him for trusting her. She told him that his vulnerability surprised her. She wrote that she saw past the jumpsuits and bright lights, that she recognized the man underneath, a man trying to stay honest in a world that demanded a version of him he didn't always believe in. "You see people as they are," she wrote, "even when they try to hide behind applause." But she never sent it. She folded the letter, placed it in a small cream envelope, and kept it in a drawer with her handwritten lyrics. She told herself she would give it to him in person, when their schedules aligned, when the world wasn't watching, when there was space for a real conversation. But time doesn't wait. When news of his death reached her, she felt the letter inside her memory like a weight that suddenly dropped. The room seemed colder. Her breath shook. She sat down slowly, like her body couldn't bear the truth all at once. Have you ever kept a message so long that it turned into a memory? Have you ever waited for the right moment, only to discover the moment would never come? Mark stepped closer, placing the bulletin gently on the table. A grainy photo of Elvis stared back, smiling, alive, larger than life. The kind of picture that made it impossible to believe he could ever be gone. Barbara reached into her bag and pulled out the envelope she had carried with her for months. It was soft at the edges now, the ink slightly faded. She ran her thumb across her own handwriting. A letter meant for a man who would never read it. She didn't cry right away. She just held the envelope like it was made of glass. Outside, the sun kept shining. Cars kept moving. The world kept spinning. But inside that studio, time stood still, because the story between them had just taken a turn she never could have prepared for. For decades, Barbara kept that unsent letter tucked away in her private archive, hidden inside a small folder labeled only with 2 initials, EP. She never spoke about it publicly. Not once. Not in interviews. Not in memoir drafts. It was too personal, too fragile, too heavy with everything that never happened. And then, in 2019, everything changed. A young archivist named Lena was cataloging old boxes for a documentary exhibit. She wasn't looking for secrets. She was just sorting papers, checking dates, arranging things in neat stacks. But when she opened a thin cream folder, she froze. Inside it lay Barbara's reply, still sealed. The envelope looked untouched, but time had softened its corners. The paper had aged into a warm, yellowed tone. The handwriting felt deliberate, careful, as if each letter had been shaped with thought and tenderness. Lena didn't open it. She simply carried it to Barbara with both hands, almost like it was a relic. Barbara sat quietly when she saw it. Her breath caught. The room seemed to shrink around her. She held the envelope the way someone holds a memory they thought was gone forever. A small, sad smile formed on her face. "I always meant to send this," she whispered. For a long moment, she didn't move. She just studied the letter, brushing a thumb across her own handwriting. Then, in a rare moment of openness, she made a choice she hadn't been ready to make for more than 40 years. She allowed a small excerpt to be shared. Not the whole letter, not the private details, just a few lines meant to show the world the truth about the connection she and Elvis once shared. The excerpt was soft, honest, and painfully human. You saw people as they were, even when they tried to hide behind applause. That is rare, rarer than talent. When fans heard those words, it felt like a missing puzzle piece had finally snapped into place. Comment sections filled with quiet shock. Music historians whispered about what this meant. And lifelong Elvis followers described the moment as a new window into an old soul. Have you ever discovered something years later that changed the way you remembered a person? Something small, but powerful enough to shift the story completely? The reveal didn't create scandal. It created understanding. It painted their almost connection not as rumor, not as fantasy, but as a rare moment of honesty between 2 artists who recognized something in each other that the world often overlooked. And that wasn't even the most surprising part, because after uncovering the letter, Barbara made one more decision, one that sent a ripple through Elvis fandom across the world, a decision that would change how the story was remembered forever. In 2021, the quiet letter that Barbara once kept hidden finally found a home, one she never expected it to reach. Graceland requested items for a rotating exhibit titled Private Voices, the untold correspondence of legends. At first, Barbara hesitated. She had protected that piece of her heart for nearly half a century. But then she looked again at Elvis's original letter. Edges worn, ink fading, and she understood something she hadn't understood before. His words weren't meant to disappear, so she agreed. On a warm spring morning, The letter arrived at Graceland in a climate-controlled case. Staff members stood silently around it, almost reverent. They knew they weren't just handling paper. They were handling a history that had lived in shadows for too long. The exhibit opened with soft lighting and slow, gentle music. Visitors walked down a hallway of photos. Elvis on stage, Elvis backstage, Elvis laughing, Elvis tired. And then, in a small glass case at the center of the room, sat the letter. His letter. Next to it, on a simple silver plaque, were 9 words that stopped people in their tracks. 2 voices. 1 moment. A connection understood too late. People read it, paused, then read it again. Some wiped their eyes. Others leaned closer, trying to imagine him writing those words in the quiet of a hotel suite. A few whispered memories about the first time they saw him live, clutching old ticket stubs they had kept since the 70s. Crowds filled the room day after day. Not noisy crowds, soft ones, gentle ones, the kind that move slowly because the moment feels sacred. They left small notes under the exhibit case. Flowers, bootleg cassette tapes, drawings, lines of lyrics written on folded paper. Each offering said the same thing in its own way. We remember. We understand now. Have you ever seen strangers gather around a story they weren't part of, yet feel like they lived inside it? Have you ever watched a truth finally reach the light after decades in the dark? The ripple spread quickly. Fan clubs posted tributes. Music historians recorded commentary videos. Even younger fans, kids born decades after Elvis passed, shared the plaque photo on social media, writing things like, "This feels different," and "Why does this hit so hard?" Because the story wasn't gossip. It wasn't rumor. It was human. And yet, even with all the emotion the exhibit stirred, Barbra knew one final chapter remained. A chapter that belonged not to history, but to us. The final chapter of their story didn't unfold in a showroom or a studio or a museum. It unfolded in the quiet space inside people's hearts. The part where unfinished conversations live forever. Because the truth is simple. The story of Elvis and Barbra wasn't about romance, or fame, or mystery. It was about something far more human. A letter unsent. A message unread. A moment missed. People who visited the Graceland exhibit understood that instantly. They stood before the glass case not just thinking about Elvis or Barbra, but thinking about themselves, about the words they hadn't said, the apologies they owed, the gratitude they never expressed, the people they meant to reach before life pulled them in different directions. A soft murmur often filled the room, the sound of strangers reflecting in unison. A man in his 70s whispered, "I should call my brother." A young woman wiped her eyes and murmured, "I still have a message I never sent." Even children stared curiously, sensing the weight even if they couldn't name it. Because this wasn't a story about 2 legends. It was a story about everyone. Have you ever carried a message so long it became part of you? Have you ever waited for the perfect moment, only to learn there is no perfect moment? Just moments you either take or lose. Elvis's letter didn't change history. Barbra's reply didn't rewrite the past. But together, they created something else. A gentle reminder that words matter. Connections matter. Honesty matters. And time is never guaranteed. That's why the final line of the plaque at Graceland resonated more than anything else. It wasn't meant for Elvis. It wasn't meant for Barbra. It was meant for us. Before you lose the chance, send the letter. If this story touched you, share it with someone who deserves to hear your truth. Maybe a friend, a parent, or someone you haven't spoken to in years. Stories like this remind us how fragile moments can be and how powerful a single message is. And if you've ever kept a letter unsent, maybe tonight is the night.